Vanakkam Dohadeva and everyone. Wonderful to be with you today, April 9th in Asia. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. And we'll attempt to share the screen. April 9th. Here we go. Our first topic. Answering some questions sent in to satsang@hindu.org. In addition to lack of willpower and encountering obstacles, very creative spelling of encountering, what are some other common reasons we don't persist and achieve our goal? So besides lack of willpower and encountering obstacles, what else gets in the way? How would you answer that question? Oh, I've come up with 3 additional reasons. I'm sure we could find more. First one, a common reason for not persevering with an undertaking is that the original decision was an emotional whim rather than a well-thought-through plan. Here's an example. We have lunch with a colleague at work who shares with us how he purchased a second home and is renting it out and earning excellent extra income, enough to take his family on pilgrimage to India last month. You think this idea is great, and wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to take your family on pilgrimage to India as well? You immediately purchase a second home and rent it out. After a year, you realize the price you paid was too high, and you are earning less than the cost of the home, and the enterprise is actually lowering your savings for the pilgrimage rather than increasing it. Therefore, you have to sell the house and incur a loss. What went wrong? The initial decision was flawed. It was based on a passing emotion rather than a well-conceived plan. This problem can be avoided by taking time to make decisions, carefully gather all the facts, talk in person to others who are successful at the enterprise, and share all this information with family and friends. Pray to Lord Ganesha for guidance. Put all this information in a detailed plan, and if you have a guru, ask for your preceptor's blessings on the plan. Second one, sometimes we embark on an endeavor without a clear purpose. For example, our best friend starts to study Bharatanatyam, so we start as well. After 5 months, we conclude this is too much work and give it up. One reason for pursuing it, our reason for pursuing it, was not solid enough. The fact that our best friend took it up. To stick to an undertaking, we need for it to be meaningful to our life, not to someone else. And a third reason for lacking steadfastness is that even though we have a purpose, a clear goal, the goal is not realistic. We have set it too high. Therefore, we do not achieve it in a reasonable period of time and give up. An example. A sincere seeker sets the goal of realizing the self in 3 years. First year practicing charya, second year focusing on kriya, third year mastering yoga, and at the end of the 3rd year, he will become a jnani through self-realization. This, of course, is not realistic. Such an approach can cause the seeker to give up the spiritual path altogether. Therefore, be sure to be realistic in the goals you set. Be sure to ask others knowledgeable in that field if the goal is realistic before you finalize the goal. During the recent Iravan Crystal Lingam installation, Shanmugam Shivacharya mentioned several times his gratitude for Kauai Aadheenam, digitising the Saiva Agamas. Can you tell us more about that project? though this is an existing presentation, and the transition doesn't work that well, but I didn't change it. One of the reasons temple worship is not better understood is that the scriptures that describe temple worship, which are called the Agamas, are not well known by the general Hindu public. They are mainly studied by priests and scholars. Gurudeva was initiated into the Saiva tradition in 1949 in Jaffna, Sri Lanka by Yogaswami. Unlike many modern teachers of Hinduism, Gurudeva placed great emphasis on establishing temples, having his Madhavasis themselves perform the Parartha Puja and initiating his advanced Grahastha Shishya in performing at Martha Puja. Gurudeva knew the centrality of the Saiva Agamas to temple worship and gave this description of the scriptural authority of his teachings. All my devotees recognize that the primary scriptural authority of our Nandinada lineage derives from the Saiva Agamas and the four noble Vedas, which include the Upanishads. Ours is a Vedic, Agamic tradition. In the 1980s, we worked with Dr. B. Natarajan to produce an English translation of Rishi Tirumular Thirumandhiram, as we knew much of the Agamic teachings were contained within this one scripture. So the Thirumandhiram is much more accessible than the Agamas themselves. That's why we chose that. In researching the Saiva Agama text, we determined that the largest collection was at the French Institute of Pondicherry, 100 miles south of Chennai. This institute was founded and directed by the late Jean Filioza. Excuse my pronunciation. Dr. Filioza's goal was to collect all material relating to the Saiva Agamas. During the late 50s and through the 60s, the late Pundit N.R. Bhatt spearheaded the collection effort. Bhatt, a scholar of the French school and former head of Indology at the Institute, gathered manuscripts from the private collections of priests and monasteries across Tamil Nadu and parts of the southern districts of Karnataka. The collection of the French Institute now consists of approximately 10,000 palm leaf codices. Many are in the Sanskrit language and written in Granta script. Others are in other languages of South and Central India, including Tamil and Telugu. There are also several thousand transcripts of palm leaf manuscripts the owners allowed to be copied, but did not want to part with. The bulk of the IFP's collection comprises manuscripts of Saiva Agamas, commentaries thereon, Saiva ritual manuals, ritual compendia, handbooks, notes of Saiva priests, and Tamil texts treating the doctrines of the Saiva Siddhanta tradition. This is the largest collection of Saiva Siddhanta manuscripts in the world, and it has duly been recognized by UNESCO by including it in its Memory of the World Register. However, a new insight developed after our visit there in 2005, as the manuscripts unfortunately showed significant deterioration. Many were perforated with holes left by insect larvae. Others have become so fragile that each handling caused damage. Pieces would break off, often carrying fragments of writing. Furthermore, the French Institute itself had no plans for preserving them in microfilm or digital files. Therefore, over the coming decades, unless something changed, more and more of the manuscripts would simply fall apart and be lost forever. The realization that no one was going to do this crucial preservation work led us to decide that we ourselves needed to take on the project of digitization. In December 2008, we arranged for 4 young men to do the work and process the photos. They averaged 2,000 photos daily and completed the collection, save 200 heavily damaged bundles, on January 1st, 2011. Altogether, they took 775,261 photographs, 750,000 photographs. These have been assembled into PDF files, one for each bundle, which are available for download on the Institute's website, possibly the first of India's ancient manuscript collections to be entirely digitized. The second digitization project, completed a few months later, has preserved 1,600 manuscripts at the sister institution, the French School of the Far East, which was just down the street. This is a specialized collection, mostly Vaishnava in content. So part of our agreement was we would do that as well. Not that we wanted to, but to be able to do the French Institute, we had to do the sister institution. So you can see it was quite an undertaking, managing to hire 4 young men and coordinating them for 2 years and so forth, all from Hawaii. Fortunately, we had some help, very good help, such as Nele Apan in Chennai was very helpful in working with us. Anyway, it got done. At a gathering of 15 senior Shivacharis in Chennai in July 2011, a hard drive with the digitized material was presented to each, giving back to them their sacred scriptural heritage in easily accessible form. At a second gathering in Chennai, a great deal of appreciation was expressed by the Shivacharyas for the work that we had accomplished. So that is our Saiva Agamas story. We simply started looking for them and ended up needing to preserve them. Quite a shift. Next is a common question asked about the need for temples. It begins with a story. Over the last few years, so this is over the last few decades, really, I've had the privilege of attending Kumbhabhishekams for Shiva temples in Perth, Australia, Atlanta, Georgia, Venkateshwara Temple, Central Florida, Lord Murugan Temple in Montreal, Canada, Baptist Swaminarayan temples in Houston, Texas, Toronto, Canada, and Delhi, India, a Bhairava Temple in Karnataka, India, and Lord Ganesha in Phoenix, Arizona. Probably a few more since then as well. Special ceremonies conducted on these occasions by an especially large number of well-trained priests are always exceptionally uplifting times. So it's uplifting for 2 reasons. These are really skilled priests, and they're using special mantras that they don't use in the day-to-day pujas. Very powerful mantras. So that makes it uplifting. On most of these occasions, there is some interaction with the youth of the temple as a formal seminar, a lecture, or simply an informal question and answer session. During one of the breaks at one of the Kumbhabhishekams, I was chatting with some of the older youth who were sons and daughters of the trustees and other key members. They were challenging me with the classic question, since God is omnipresent, what is the need to build large temples to worship Him? The cost of construction is quite large, plus then you have the ongoing cost of monthly maintenance that has to be met. Couldn't all that money be spent in a better way? A very good question, and part of the original story was the person who was asking the question was a young woman, law school graduate, who was the daughter of the temple president. So she's asking, why do we need to build temples? Her father hadn't managed to convince her. So how would you answer that question? Since God's omnipresent, why do we need to build temples? My answer went something like this. Since God is omnipresent, shouldn't we be able to experience Him equally everywhere? For example, God permeates this room. By looking intently at the room, shouldn't you be able to experience God? In theory, you should. I then asked those present to look around. How many can see God permeating this room? Valid question. All the youth present had to admit that they couldn't see God permeating the room. I then continued, practically speaking, God's omnipresence is a very subtle form of consciousness, too subtle for most of us to experience unless we are quite skilled in meditation. I then gave an analogy with other objects that are difficult to see. If we want to see a distant galaxy, we can go to an observatory and use a powerful telescope. To see into the nucleus of a cell, we can go to a laboratory and use an electron microscope. Similarly, to see God, there is a powerful tool we can use to enable us to be successful. We can go to the temple and through the sanctified murti experience God. Temples, and especially the murtis within them, have this ability because they are specially sacred places for three reasons: construction, consecration, and continuous daily worship. So they all begin with a C. C-O-N makes them easy to remember. Hereditary temple architects known as sthapadis are commissioned to design and construct the temple. By tradition, every stone is set in place according to the sacred architecture found in the Agamic scriptures. Consecration occurs through the powerful ceremony of Kumbhabhishekam, which involves a large number of priests performing elaborate ceremonies for days on end. Then begins the schedule of daily pujas that are held thereafter, conducted by professional priests. The daily pujas sustain and gradually increase the sanctity set in motion at the Kumbhabhishekam. In these three ways, the temple and the murtis within them are sanctified. In other words, if you just did the Kumbhabhishekam, the power of, and didn't do any daily pujas afterwards, the power of that would gradually dissipate. So initially the pujas sustain that power, and then over time they can increase that power depending on number of pujas, number of priests, etc. Another common question regarding temple worship is, do Hindus worship idols? How would you answer that question? A few years ago, I attended a Kumbhabhishekam in Fort Worth, Texas. One of the priests there, who was also a scholar, gave an excellent explanation of the sacredness of the murti. He began by explaining that Hindus do not worship idols. This is, of course, a common misunderstanding that many people have, including some Hindus. The priest went on to explain that the stone form of the deity can be called an idol or a statue before the sacred water is poured over it in the prana pratishta ceremony. But after that takes place, it is transformed into a sacred murti, and in that murti, the deity actually resides. During a talk during our recent Crystallingam installation, Shanmugam Shivacharya expressed the same idea in the terminology that the vigraha doesn't want to change that. Okay, must need a click. Huh? That the vigraha becomes a devata through the prana pratishta ceremony. So he's using a different terminology. Through the prana pratishta ceremony, the vigraha, which is his word for statue or idol, becomes a devata, which is the word we use. We use murti. So the prana pratishta is what transforms it, and it was quite evident in the ceremony in Fort Worth. They had a number of large granite murtis to install, and one ceremony, all the devotees present got to pour milk over the granite statues to purify them, and then the statues were put into the shrines, and then the devotees got to put oil over them. And then the next ceremony was the priest pouring the sacred water over them, and after that was done, the devotees couldn't touch the images any longer because they had been transformed into murtis, and only an Agamic priest can touch them at that point. So it was nicely illustrated. And we have some scriptural quotes. It's showing that it's not just Saiva, it's also Vaishnava Agama. This idea is found in the Pancharatra text, Satvata Samhita, chapter 6, verse 22. When the perfectly designed image is systematically installed, he occupies the concerned image. By his gracious presence in that image, he he gives concrete and visible expressions to all of his transcendental and imperceptible qualities. Beautiful verse. Swami Harshananda, in his Encyclopedia of Hinduism, makes this statement about archa, which is his word for murti. Archa is the form of the deity represented by an icon that is transmuted into the very form of the deity, full of the six divine attributes, through the power of the mantras used in the installation as well as subsequent worship. So, installation and subsequent worship, same idea. Therefore, the proper installation of the Archa Murti with the prescribed Agama procedures is very essential for the power of the Archa Murti. Even the man-made images, though prepared out of inanimate substances, can become alive if they are duly consecrated through the prescribed rites. Also required is the proper subsequent maintenance of the sanctity through pujas, utsavas, and other regular and proper worship. Nicely said. He's, I'm not sure if he's still alive, Ramakrishna Swami in Bengaluru, who seems to have an unusually knowledgeable background in Pancharatra Agama. Perhaps his family was of that tradition. God, who is omnipotent, descends into such images with a subtle body. This is the Archavatara, or incarnation for purposes of ordinary worship. So Gurudeva also taught this same idea. We worship God Shiva and the gods who by their infinite powers spiritually hover over and indwell the image or murti, which we revere as their temporary body. We commune with them through the ritual act of puja. And the next one is Saiva Agama, Ajita Agama. Shivalingam Puja is for the purpose of invoking the presence of Sadashiva in the lingam. Very direct statement. And basically in the Saiva Puja, we invoke Vahana, we're invoking the deity, and then at the end we have Visarjana. We're telling the deity, thank you very much for coming, and now you're excused, and please come again next time. So we excuse the deity. The deity is only there during the puja, so we invite the deity and then excuse the deity. That's a Saiva idea. In this illustration, a devotee looks within and beyond the Shivalingam Murti to behold God, Lord Nataraja, here in his spiritual body of light. The man is performing his daily puja, chanting Sanskrit mantras, offering fruit, water, flowers, incense, and light, worshipping devoutly, beseeching God to send blessings through the enshrined image. And then Gurudeva's wonderful quote here, we may liken this mystery to our ability to communicate with others through the telephone. We do not talk to the telephone, we use a telephone as a means of communication with another person who is perhaps thousands of miles away. Without the telephone, we could not converse across such distances, and without the sanctified murti in the temple or shrine, we cannot easily commune with the deity. Both are instruments of communication. The stone or metal deity images enshrined in the temple are not mere symbols of God and the gods. They are not mere inert idols, but the forms through which divine love, power, and blessings flood forth from the inner world of the gods into this physical world. As we progress in our worship, we begin to adore the image as the deity's physical body, for we know that he is actually present and conscious in it during puja, aware of our thoughts and feelings, and even sensing the pujari's gentle touch on the metal or stone. That's the end of our first topic. Second topic. Thoroughness, which is the 60th character quality. 4 more to go. Almost done. Of our character building workbook. How would you define thoroughness? The workbook gives this definition. Thoroughness is the quality of taking pains to do things carefully and completely. I cultivate it by properly completing every detail of a task before I consider it finished. The opposite is cursoriness. It's a word I don't generally use, cursoriness. And the quote from Gurudeva, finish that which you begin. Finish it well, beyond your expectations, no matter how long it takes. If you are going to do something, do it well, no matter if it is a simple task or a complicated one. If you're going to read a book and intend to finish the book and then read it, finish the book and understand what it had to offer you, for that was the purpose for reading it. Thorough job. Tremendous will is needed on the path of self-realization, of drawing the forces of energy together, of drawing awareness away from that which it is aware of constantly, of finishing every job that we begin in the material world and doing it well. Make everything that you do satisfy the inner scrutiny of your inner being. Do a little more than you think that you are able to do. Comparing the actions of one who is thorough to one who is cursory. First situation, faced with your first article assignment for a magazine, you, thoroughness. Spend extra hours researching everything others have said on the subject. Cursoriness. Sit down and in 2 hours produce an incomplete piece that is factually flawed. Second situation, mom asks you to wash dishes. Mom asks you to wash the dinner dishes, so you, thoroughness. Clean them, and instead of letting dishes dry by the sink, towel dry them and put them in the cupboard. Cursoriness. Wash the dishes as she asked, but leave them wet and do not clean the sink afterwards. Third situation, the family assigns you the duty to plan a picnic, and you. Tactfulness. Google the perfect spot, make a menu, shop for ingredients, and then purchase a special basket just for style. Cursoriness. Put bread and cheese in a cardboard box and tell everyone to meet in the car. Reflection. Take a moment to identify a few ways in which you could improve in thoroughness. And the assignment during these 2 weeks after you have seemingly finished a task, reflect if there is anything you have left undone, and then do it, completing the work in every detail. Thank you very much. Oh.